is perhaps the biggest external risk that we have outside of another global catastrophe or pandemic or whatever, even though we already knew that we realized that it wasn't necessarily as bad as we expected. It has to do with the regulatory framework, not only in the United States, in Europe, and in many places in Latin America. This framework that forces our products to be considered in a particular category that imposes a lot of expenses and costs for us to comply with the regulation. Just to give you an idea, a couple of weeks ago, or I think sometime in middle of March, there was this meeting of the World Health Organization on the framework to control the consumption of tobacco. And one of the statements some countries were pushing there was to prohibit local governments, national governments, against their own sovereignty, to prohibit them to meet with tobacco industry representatives, to have no conversation, no communication at all, which is absurd in many ways. First of all, if you want to control something, there's no worse way than closing the doors of communication, you know? And second of all, when you have a country that depends so much, in countries like Nicaragua, Honduras, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, and many other countries that depend so much on our industry, to prohibit that they communicate and freely transmit ideas, concepts, and solutions to the problems, it goes against any common sense. And that's the type of things that some organizations around the world are pushing for. Now, regulation has two sides. I think, of course, you have the negative side, which is basically restriction, inhibiting our capacity to compete freely, to trade freely. When, for example, there are countries, the countries that have experienced the worst effect of the pandemic has been those where the governments don't allow for online trading or online commerce of cigars, like Spain, for example. They have suffered tremendously, even though they could have sold more, because the governments don't allow online trading, even though there are mechanisms to control that very easily nowadays. So you have an impact not only on the local trades, like the retailers, the distributors and importers, but you also have an impact on us because you're imposing a substantial burden to comply with the regulations. And of course, this will be another thing that will increase the cost of doing business moving forward. When we talk about track and trace, when we talk about a lot of those requirements that are slowly coming in line in countries like Europe. Lab testing, for example, is extremely expensive to send samples and do lab testings for every single SKU that you're going to be introducing to a marketplace. And I understand what the reason they are doing it. But it's a big risk, and especially it's big risk to smaller companies that do not have the capacity to respond to those trades. So, and we all come from a small background. We all started somewhere. So if you want to hinder the growth and the development of an industry, kill the small ones. And that's what happens with regulation. And I think that's a big threat, even though it's not necessarily in the short run, because I think the governments should focus on bigger priorities right now than controlling our products. And I think some of them have come to realize that maybe cigar smoking is not what they should be focusing in this precise moment in time. But there is a good side of regulation that I might say, and I don't want to be controversial in this way, but regulation forces us to be better too. And it has forced many of us to be better, cigar makers, business administrators, because the risk of going out of business because of regulation is so high that you have to do anything that you can, from investing in your systems to investing in proper tobacco to investing in all the process and techniques that allow you to be better to comply with that regulation.